Hey, Greg.
Hey,
Am I the first one here? Looks like um, people don't.
Hello.
There we are.
Hey V, how's it going?
Hey V. It's good. How are you?
Good. I'm sunburned. It
Oh,
sucks.
cool. Enjoy.
Yeah. I just
Are you
um.
still in Barbados?
Sorry.
Are you still in Barbados?
No, I left on Monday. I
Oh,
um. I did some surfing on Monday and I got owned.
cool.
And yeah, I arrived on Monday night, and then yesterday I spent in Toronto and here, and now I'm a little bit back in action. Um, before Boston. Are you in Brussels right now, V?
No, I'm in Toronto.
Okay, cool. Because there was like something that announced that you
Yeah,
would be.
no. I thought I'd be going, but I ended up getting some stuff in. Well, basically, financial crypto happened, and so I realized that there was no point in me going all the way to Europe and back.
Right. Okay. Cool. Yeah, I was wondering how that thing's going. I'll page the girls later. Hey Jeff. Hey Hudson. Hey Aaron. Um, so do you guys mind if I broadcast the watch link on Twitter?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, that's fine.
Hey everybody, I'm trying my car's Bluetooth, so let me know if this works out. I'm being safe.
Yeah, actually, I have to drive my son to school. Normally, this is not the day that I drive him, but he made a special request, so I'm going to try to participate via the car um, for a few minutes. It's only about a
It's
15
a few minutes starting now.
Yeah, but it's okay. I mean, because
We'll just kind of shoot the shit a little bit, get everyone up to date on what we've really been up to, and then
yeah, no, I mean, I should be able to, participate. It's not a big deal.
okay, great.
Hang on once. Okay. So, looks like we got a lot to cover. So, who wants to go first?
Whenever people want me to give an update on the POC, I can.
Well, why don't you go first with that?
Yeah, let's start with that.
Okay, so update on the POC. Let's say probably almost done. The thing I'm just trying to do. Let me just print my to-do list out. Right, just do some modifications to the scoring rule. Trying to really get all of the parameters nailed down, just so that we can be sure like that the entire protocol is kind of implemented in the POC, so that theoretically from a protocol standpoint it's ready to go, even though in practice there's a whole bunch of inefficiencies and bugs still left in it. Interesting stuff that I ran into in the process. Right, so one of them is the scoring rule issue. So just to kind of explain a bit more what that is, basically, before yesterday, my scoring rule was just fairly simple, quadratic thing where, I don't know, you probably saw on Skype, but it says that here, in Q. So where Q is the odds for with which you're betting on either a block hash or a state root. So SFQ is Q, that's the reward for betting correctly. FFQ is negative Q squared, or more precisely, negative Q squared over 2. So that basically means that it's theoretically a proper scoring rule, so you might notice that if your actual opinion is that the odds of a block succeeding are Q, then you actually have the incentive to increase your bet going up to Q but not going beyond Q, and you can kind of do the math yourself with derivatives. But the problem with that formula is that it does a good job of incentivizing kind of the last part of the probability space. So moving from the point where people are making large bets on a block to the point where people are staking everything on a block, but it doesn't do as good a job of going from the sort of neutral 50-50 points to the middle point. basically because at that point the rewards and the penalties are both pretty tiny. So I added this kind of logarithmic component to it, which should fix that, but that required me to kind of fiddle around with constants a bit more. So that was one issue. The other issue is, hold on, right, looking at a few ways to increase efficiency. So basically the problem here is that quite often, right now, the way the algorithm is working is that it's basically finalizing every block within a couple of minutes. But realistically, I could see it taking, in some cases where things are too favorable, taking hours to finalize a block. And I'm kind of concerned that in that case, we'll get a situation where each individual bet would have to contain like thousands of parts to it. And
Yeah. I was wondering. I was wondering about this. Basically, and the reason that this happens is because you need to, because the resolution event only happens at finality. The way that I kind of handled it is by having you bet not on which blocks will be finalized, but on the probability that the average probability that people will bet on a block at when by the time we forget. So there's like a maximum height at which we'll bet. And so
hold on. So there's one problem with that, which is that if let's say your maximum time at which you'll bet is, let's say, 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. If the protocol fails to come to consensus on 10 minutes, that sounds like it's just going to fail to come to consensus.
No, so it doesn't fail to come to consensus. It just fails to be finalized.
Okay. So that means that if it fails to be finalized, then basically the entire state is going to fail to be finalized to some degree.
No, because it can be it can still be finalized if we come to consensus on if, like, say,
on what, the state root
later, right? We're not going to be able to finalize the blocks at different heights, but we will still be able to finalize the state because we bet, independently on the state than the blocks.
Yeah, finalizing blocks and not finalizing blocks and finalizing the state feels kind of weird to me, I suppose.
Yeah, and basically the way that I kind of deal with this is by using basically the four choice rule, where basically what might happen is, like, okay, you have a partition and then you have like two sets of validators betting, but they're not betting on the same stuff because the partition has lasted longer than then we're willing to remember the opinion table. Then they would basically have to switch over to the one with more participation with more bonds, and then they would be able to start finalizing. But the main thing is that you're not allowed to bet at earlier heights after you've forgotten about them.
Right. Yeah, so I guess the thing that you could do is I could just restrict the maximum length of bets and then add like extra special logic for coordinating betting on state roots.
Yeah, I think that it's kind of important because otherwise a long-lasting partition will cause the overhead to increase very large.
To the point where basically the entire algorithm breaks. Yeah.
What does it mean to finalize a state without finalizing the blocks? Does that make sense?
Well, basically, it's meaningless in a mathematical sense, but once you realize that making a bet itself has a computational cost, it kind of does make some sense. So basically, the idea is that a state root is kind of implicitly a summary of every single block before it. So if you can finalize a state root, implicitly you still are finalizing every block that came before it.
Yeah, okay, that's what I...
Yeah.
Yeah.
And basically, the idea is that the important thing is that everyone kind of can agree on the state, which means that they can agree on which blocks won, but blocks can be winning before they're finalized.
Yes.
And so we can still have. So for example, you might imagine that, like, that just over a third of nodes go offline, and so we can't actually finalize blocks, but we still get a lot of economic finality because if 66% sign on both sides, then you still get quite a bit of slashing.
Okay, so one sort of reductio ad absurdum question I have. let's suppose that this mechanism of saying that, if we bet if the block hashes go too far, then we give up and we just bet on state roots actually works. Then why not just give up on the whole concept of betting on block hashes and switch the entire algorithm to just betting on state roots?
Um,
I have to say that it sounds a bit more reasonable.
I think that one issue is that there's the combinatorial space of state roots is much larger than the states of blocks per height, right? So you have if you have one block can win per height, it basically adds, right? So if you have n blocks per height, then and m heights, then you have n times m possibilities. But if you have n blocks per height and m heights, then you have n to the m state roots.
Yeah. Right, but then the thing, in the event of consensus failure, you might still have n to the m state roots to choose from.
That's only true. Sorry, that is true. But if we still agree on which blocks are winning, then we can.
Right, but the thing is that in practice, in all of the consensus failures I had in my tests, there was no agreement on which blocks are winning. Basically, the entire thing kind of decays to a point where it just gets stuck on 50-50.
Sorry, being finalized or winning?
No, there's no agreement on which blocks are winning. Basically, the whole thing just gets stuck on 50-50, or roughly 50-50. It might bounce back and forth, or it might kind of be non-committal.
Okay. Yeah, and then basically, you can imagine that what you would have is, say, if it's 50-50 between n blocks and m heights, then you would have n to the m. Or basically, you'd have an product on the number of incremental blocks at every height for the number of possible state roots.
Yeah, you have an n to the m dimensional sim blocks that you have to kind of bet inside, which I suppose is fine. I mean, I do have code for betting simplexes now. So,
yeah, I mean, it's super important to bet on simplexes because you have many blocks competing at a height, especially if you have a Byzantine valid, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that is the way to go. But the reason that to do the blocks first is to reduce the dimensionality of the state space that we're betting on.
Does a state root bet also specify which height for that state root?
Yes. So the state root bets are betting at a specific height.
And I don't see the difference between state roots and blocks.
So betting on a block hash is basically betting on what happened at one particular height independently of every other height. Betting on a state root, a state root is implicitly a summary of just about every height of a block and every height below it.
That's right. Yeah.
So blocks don't specify their parents?
No, not for the sake of
blocks don't have parents.
Not for the sake of betting. I mean, basically, I have a version of Casper where blocks do specify their parents, but it's not in order to determine which block gets actually executed. It has more to do with my crazy lower than network latency client hack.
So it's kind of just think of it a little bit like as lists of transactions, right?
Oh, sorry. Can you rephrase your question?
So I kind of like thinking of it as just listed transactions. So I like thinking of it like 2 rounds of betting. Like you have one round that's betting on what listed transactions to produce a state root on, then another round of betting of the state root.
Yeah, that's similar to my impression of Vlad's proposal. First you're voting on a schedule, and then you actually vote on the resolving the state that results from the schedule.
Yeah,
right. And you'll probably produce.
That was originally Vitalik's idea. Vitalik deserves all the credit for that.
And you'll probably end up producing you could make it even asynchronous so that you could produce a lot more lists of transactions than state roots.
Well, if you have
no, you can produce a lot more state roots than lists of transactions, Martin.
Because why would you want to do that? Lists of transactions are easy to produce. State roots is where all the hard work comes in.
Yeah, but so imagine that for every so just to simplify, imagine for every transaction there's like, well, I guess the betting works on say like groups of transactions at a time independently at every height, and so it would be like your list of transactions is made up of 4 sections, and for each section there is like say 2 alternatives. So there's 2 to the 4 possible lists of transactions. But we can kind of decide independently for every chunk, so we can make 4 decisions, as opposed to betting on 2 to the 16 state roots.
Oh, okay.
Or binary.
Does the list
as opposed
does
to
the
betting 2 to the 14 state roots.
does the list of transactions also specify the order of the transactions?
Sorry, so a block specifies, gives an order for the transactions in that block, right?
Okay, so if you have a list of transactions and you have a block height, then you know what the previous, the state root of the previous block. Then
Right,
can you
but
derive the state root from
root. You don't know the state root of the previous block.
Oh, okay.
You just know the hash of the previous list of transactions.
You may or may not, honestly. Like one of the cool things is this can go faster than network latency because you don't actually need to know.
If you did make it know, though, it would be easier to merge transactions or merge transaction lists. So let's just think of them as transaction lists because they're not whole blocks yet.
I don't know, Martin. I don't understand.
No, I understand what Martin is proposing. That's actually true, but you can also do that. Martin's proposal makes a certain amount of sense, and it depends on how you do sharding as well. So if you shard by namespace, then it actually makes sense to do merging of transaction schedules. I don't think of them necessarily as lists, right? They will be schedules because they'll be partially ordered.
Sure, no, I can see that, but right now we're trying to just figure out how to do like a simple, just like the complete order on the. Basically, we're just doing like one sequential. Where we like bet independently at every height for the of transactions at that height, and then applying them all sequentially. But Greg, so do you?
I mean,
bet on the
that's
schedule
that's actually the sequentialization here is a complicating rather than simplifying assumption. So, I mean, if you want to make it, you can certainly do that, but it doesn't simplify things. It actually makes things harder.
Well, assume that all the transactions and affect the same piece of state, and so they can't be parallelized. Because
so everything affects exactly the same.
Yeah, so basically there's a subset of whatever is this problem.
Yeah, so you're looking at little mini strands as opposed to looking at the processes. Yeah.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, that's basically like traditional simple blockchain architectures work, right? They just like assume that everything is going to go sequentially, and then for scaling we'll be able to the schedule that we agree on sequential, but it'll be much more concurrent. But still, I would want to bet first on the order of transactions. First on and like basically agree on the schedule and then agree on the state, rather than betting directly on the state. Do you kind of agree that is the way to go, basically because of the computational complexity?
Well, now what you have to do is you're not just betting on the order of transactions. You're betting on the order of transactions plus some partition of the state. So you actually have a multiplier in the complexity.
So I didn't. Do you mean that if there's a partition, then we're not going to have like complete finality on the schedule, and so we're going to have a more complicated betting on the state?
What I'm saying is that the little strand of transactions, they only affect some chunk of the state. Not every transaction affects every piece of the state, right? Some pieces of the state are you have the identity map from one place to the other, and so now now the betting is not just on a schedule of transactions. It's on a schedule of transactions plus an agreement on the part of the state that's actually going to be affected. So you get the size of this, you get the size of the state space times the number times the transactions.
But I didn't suggest that we would bet on like a schedule which is a total order, right? I mean, the schedule in a scaling context would be, would reflect this kind of separation of interest, right? Because we don't need to order everything. We only need to order certain things, and those are the things that we'll be betting on ordering.
Okay, now I'm sort of not following. Either you're looking at the sequential little strands, right, which are always updating the same state, but that's only really a chunk of the actual state, even in a particular validator, right? Or you're betting, or you have a partial order.
Right. So I'm saying that, like, in either case, we will bet first on the schedule and then on the state.
Oh yeah, that makes total sense.
Okay, cool. Because earlier we were having discussions about whether it would make sense to just, if we're going to bet on the state route when there isn't a finalized order, whether it just made sense to not ever bet on the schedule. So are we all kind of in agreement that it's a good idea to bet on the schedule before betting on the state routes? Firstly, in general, and then what we're going to try to say is that also, if in the event that the schedule isn't finalized, that we would still follow that same routes.
Yeah. No, yeah, I could see that being viable. Okay, it sounds like you're giving me a lot of work on for POC3 then.
One other question, Vlad. Would you be able to produce... okay, so I think producing orders are going to be really fast to do, right?
Sorry, what do you mean by producing orders?
Orders of transactions, list of transactions, sorry.
Yeah.
Nomenclature. Can we call those schedules?
Can we call them
schedules?
Please.
All right.
The blocks. We've been calling them blocks for a really long time.
I like schedules.
just, everyone in the space knows that a block contains an ordered list of transactions. We can just, like, for now, assume that this more complex concurrency stuff will be made up of lots of blocks.
Yeah, but it doesn't have a state root yet, so it's not really a block.
Oh, so that's the thing that changes here in the Casper setting, is that blocks don't have their own state roots.
So we'll call it schedules.
No, I don't like it. I don't like it.
Well, too bad. The community is converging on schedules.
No, that's you converging and you conflating yourself with the community.
I'm with Martin on this one.
I think it's confusing for me, for my nomenclature, because I think about basically, I think in my scaling solution I have kind of the schedule step actually comes after the block step. So I have the recorded order and then the scheduled order, and then I can get the state. But the scheduled order isn't just a non-modified recorded order, and the order that's recorded is the order that's published in blocks. So things come in a certain order, and then actually I do some reordering in order which I call scheduling, and then I do execution. So for me, the schedule is the thing that's going to be executed, but the thing that's initially being proposed has like one level of direction before that, right? So I might the way things show up in what you're calling schedule isn't necessarily the way that I'm going to schedule transactions before they're executed, and so I would like for the schedule to necessarily be the thing before the state is executed, which in this case, even in this case, if we have different blocks winning at every height, that block doesn't really know that it's going to be part of the schedule. It's just like a kind of, it tries to be a part of the schedule, but it's actually going to determine which blocks are part of the schedule at lower heights.
Okay, so you're suggesting that you're reserving schedule for a more final order or partial order.
Basically, I want it to be a schedule is something that you can derive a post state from. whereas the block is just like a little piece of the schedule, and you can't derive a post state from it because it's not a complete schedule. It's just like it's a little thing that's part of a process for determining the schedule.
Okay. I mean, yeah. I mean, if you have a compositional notion of schedule, then schedules can have pieces which are schedules. But I
Right,
understand.
but I can also have that in my current setup where I have something before the schedule show up as well.
Okay. I mean, I'm fine with. And I think if I've heard you correctly, then what you're saying is that when blocks are combined, what you're calling blocks are combined, there may be a reordering up to some equivalences on reordering. So I mean, up to some equivalence on state semantics. So two different blocks with different orders may be considered equivalent relative to what they do to the state.
That's part of it, but that's not quite what I'm saying.
I'm not saying that's the totality of what you're saying, but that's part of what you're saying.
I'm not even relying on that. So the thing that I'm saying is that the order in which things are observed, or the little like orders of transactions get proposed and bet on, is going to be, you can't immediately derive the schedule that you will use to determine a state that you'll bet on, because you can't look at all schedules, because schedules are going to be there's too many of them, but you can look at, say, all blocks at a height.
Well, you can look at all schedules if you use an algebraic presentation, right? I mean, that's kind of the whole point of the process algebra stuff, is that it compresses the state space by a gigantic factor. This was in fact why at MCC, when we were initially looking at relaxed transaction processing, we started with state machines, and then we realized that the state machines completely swamped all computation that was available or projected to be available for the next 30 or 40 years. And so that's why we switched to an algebraic presentation, because the algebraic term gives you not just one schedule, but lots and lots and lots of them, because there are equivalences on the term.
Right, sure, I totally hear that, but there's only so many differences without a difference that you can get rid of, and I don't think what you're suggesting is that we bet directly on the state, which is determined by a whole schedule, but what we're doing instead is betting on something in order to pull out a schedule, in order to pull out a state.
Yes, I mean, those two positions are completely consistent, but I think that the only thing is that you have to make sure that there's a computational trace, so like you would be subject to claims of malfeasance if validators all agree on a particular observed order, and then you do some reorderings, and you can't show that the reorderings are somehow computationally related to what they bet on.
Yeah, totally. So all I'm suggesting, although the reason that I initially brought up my little scaling thing was that in my scaling thing, I give a protocol by which there's explicitly allowed reorders.
Yes, exactly, right. And those allowed reorders have to do with equivalences.
No, it doesn't. It has to do with the finality process and getting things untangled so that we can finalize state.
If you can't prove that there's an equivalence in the reordering, then people are going to be upset.
I know, but they're going to prefer having finality than to have things not be reorged without changes. Right? You really have to choose between those two. But this is a discussion in scaling, and I'm not sure we want to go down this rabbit hole right now. But because I'm still just objecting to the schedule thing. But hopefully I've sowed enough uncertainty that Martin doesn't think there's community consensus on using the word schedule for a block.
Well, I mean, I think in the future we'll have technology that'll just translate like language for us, and we'll all have our own terms.
I love that. But I have to levy my concern to the last statement you made, Vlad, that so I don't think that I would prefer finality over my paycheck deposit got eliminated by a reorder. No, I wouldn't prefer that.
Sure, but I mean, if someone's owing you a paycheck deposit, like it's up to them to make sure that they get you a finalized one, right? Like you shouldn't take a non-finalized paycheck and be like and to the bank, right? And if you did, then there would by definition it would be possible for your thing to be removed, for it to all of a sudden not be there, right? I think we're kind of talking past each other a little bit because the thing that I'm talking about with the kind of reorgs is for example, suppose that there's two contracts that send transactions, send calls back and forth to each other until the transactions run out of gas, and people are constantly sending transactions to these two contracts, and they're just bouncing back and forth until they run out of gas, and there's always 20 or whatever large number of transactions in the process of doing this. I can never finalize these transactions unless at some point I say, okay, unless I do some reorgs or I make everyone halt and wait for the transactions to stop before sending another one into those pairs of contract. And the reason is basically that these transactions are not going to be ordered because they're going to be before and after each other. The causal links are tight between them, and so you can't finalize one without finalizing the other one. Or in this case, I can have an arbitrarily large spiral of them. And in order to finalize that state, I'm either going to have to tell people to wait before their transactions are executed, or I can do some reorgs. And I would rather give them a non-finalized transaction and have them potentially look at their paycheck and see it go away, and then have to call up their boss and tell them to that their attempt to pay them didn't work out, than to have it block and have basically the boss sitting there trying to make a payment and not having it happen. And basically the reason for that is that any kind of blocking that the protocol does is going to be a source of centralization. And so basically, I have to do some reorgs that are just allowed, which basically means that I'm going to need to derive a schedule that isn't the observed schedule before I give you a state. That is at least a finalized state. But anyways, the only reason I brought this up is because I don't want to call the block schedules, because for me blocks are pre-scheduling. So let's just continue discussion on. So we talked a little bit about betting and the betting in the event of non-conversions leading to very large opinion tables, and how to deal with that by betting on the state, even though we haven't finalized.
After some number of minutes, automatically turning into betting on a simplex of state roots.
Yeah, and hopefully people will have to propose the state roots, and so hopefully the simplex won't actually go to 2 to the m sides, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So the way my simplex betting algorithm works is basically that it only looks at the possibilities that people have actually proposed.
Yeah, and I think that is the only way to do it, because if you looked at all the possibilities, then it would be a huge pain.
Maddeningly complex, yeah.
It's just that everyone would have to compute this stuff.
Yeah.
So without, if anyone, if everyone's comfortable, we could move on to the bonding unbonding discussion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So how do you do it right now in your POC2?
Okay, so for bonding, I use the formula where I have a minimum deposit that kind of exponentially goes up to infinity the more existing validators there are. For withdrawing, I kind of realized that you probably can't forcibly withdraw people, at least without kind of introducing a whole bunch of risks. So the approach I'm taking is basically that there's a kind of per block tax that the validators have to pay, which the point of that is to basically cancel out most of the scoring rule payouts. So you only actually get interest in the scoring rule if you do really well, and if you make only mediocre bets, you actually end up losing money, and I eventually end up increasing tax over time, so it becomes unprofitable, and that's it.
Yeah. So this is something that the way that I kind of do it, and I've done a little bit of rethinking about my approach, and I think I can basically boil it down to your bet. Instead of giving odds in a scoring function, what I would do is put a little piece of your deposit, which you would lose if that block didn't eventually get finalized. Say.
Right, but how do you decide what the size?
And then I would just force everyone to bet at a piece of their deposit at every height. And
so you can't force people to bet at every height, because if someone gets censored, they lose.
Right. But if you go offline, you lose too, right?
Yeah, I agree, but you should only lose slightly if you get.
That's right. So I figure out what that piece is for that losing slightly.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is that you have some reward if you make the bet, and you have some penalty if you make or if you have a reward if you make the bet and the bet turns out correct, and you have a penalty if you make a bet and the bet turns out wrong. So it sounds like you just have a scoring rule.
Yeah, it's kind of like a scoring rule, but the reward is only going to be transaction fees, and so I don't.
The reward is only going to be transaction what? Oh, transaction fees. Well, hold on.
I don't really have like a loss on my scoring rule.
Right. Okay. So that basically sounds like you're taking the same approach as I am, except that you're setting the tax to equal 100% of the maximum possible reward.
Right. Yeah. So that's why I was bringing it up, because I saw a lot of parallels. Yeah. Yeah, so let's get back to the unbonding thing. So talk about the complexity that would come about if you unbonded people mandatorily. I mean, the main thing that I'm thinking about is if we want to sample the people who are bonded out of a larger group of people.
Not quite. Hold on. So I think the thing that concerns me more than anything else is that I like the property that if you receive a bet, you know that bet is going to be valid, in the sense that if it's wrong, then it gets punished. And the problem is that once you start mandatorily unbonding people, then you lose that guarantee, basically, because, well, it turns out that the bet might end up kind of getting censored all the way until it's not valid anymore.
Oh yeah. So for me, when you unbond them, that means they go into this unbonding period, which is many months long. So their bets are still meaningful. They're just no.
Right, but hold on. But if their bets are meaningful,
so you're not allowed. You'll be punished for placing a bet, say like 100 heights after you get unbonded, but your bond is unbonding for like months afterwards.
Okay, so it sounds like actually sounds almost equivalent to my approach again. Because. Okay. Because with my approach, right, basically what happens is that the tax kind of goes up after 4 months. So so basically, if you bet and you win, then you're slightly unprofitable. But if you bet and you lose, then you're still basically extremely unprofitable to the point of losing everything if you bet with maximum odds.
So then you would unbond in order to rebond.
Exactly.
Yeah. So the main reason I want to like select them to leave is because I want to basically have a larger pool of people that are attempting to bond than people who are actually bonded.
Right.
And I don't want people to just stay in the bonded set forever. And you've accomplished it by making it more expensive for them to stay.
Yeah.
Whereas what I'm thinking about doing is just
it sounds like your approach basically is making it more expensive for them to stay.
No, it's insisting that they leave in order so that someone else.
What do you
can
mean
come
by insisting?
I mean, I just place them into unbonding, and they're
right. Okay, but you place them into unbonding, but it sounds as though the bets are still valid.
Only the bets are still valid, but they can no longer place new bets.
Well, hold on, no, but they can place new bets because you already said that if the bet comes in after the unbonding period, then it still gets registered.
No, it's still economically meaningful, but it doesn't.
In the sense that you only count losses and not gains. Is
Well,
that
no,
what
you
you're trying to
know,
get?
the bet can only be at certain heights, right? So you don't know. So suppose that at
Oh,
height,
you're not allowed to bet on heights after your unbonding height.
exactly.
But hold on, but what if you decide that you do bet on heights after your unbonding height anyway?
Oh, you when clients have to learn, when they
Clients
sign
have to
up,
learn what your withdrawal height is.
they have to they have to learn who the new bonding set is all the time whenever they sync up, right?
Right. Yeah. Okay. Fine. No. Okay. I can see that working. Hmm. Okay.
And basically, do you have or are you interested in having a larger pool of people attempting to bond than who are actually bonded?
Um. I mean, all I care about is having a number of active validators that's like roughly within reasonable all the time.
Yeah. So I'm thinking that having a larger set of people who could be bonded, who want to be bonded, than are bonded, will guarantee this by having basically a buffer room.
I see. So basically, if people get kicked out, someone else automatically gets queued in. Is
Yeah,
that kind of right? Yeah, you could do that.
That's my current favorite approach. So you're
Well,
just letting everyone in the validator set.
yeah. So one thing that I like about that option is that you could potentially have a situation because even though we're trying to be crypto economic, in reality, most validators are just going to be nice and they're not going to try to double spend. And I'd like to try to kind of get some kind of dividend out of that in the normal case. So basically, if we have some kind of like lineup mechanic, then even though unbonding will lose, or even though double betting might have a cost of, let's say, 5 million ether, it'll still have a budget requirement of, let's say, 15 million or something similar, and that's a nice property to have.
Sorry, can you repeat that? I didn't quite follow.
So the argument is that suppose that if you try to bond, you somehow only have, let's say, a 25% chance of successfully bonding.
Okay.
Then even though, let's say, you have enough bonding that making a double spending or breaking the chain or whatever will have a cost of like 5 million ether of lost security deposits, in order to get there, you would still have to put, let's say, 20 million ether into the system.
Right, of course.
The budget will be even higher than the cost.
Right. So that's good, right?
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, but we still need to have a minimum.
Basically, because we have the Kraken.
The flip side is that you still.
Yeah, like we have the cost and the budget. We basically get the benefit of the our security model and the PeerCoin security model at the same time.
Yeah, I think that's cool. But the important thing to say is also that your probability of getting in is going to be like 25% per bonding period or per some period, right? If you wait long enough, your bond will get in.
Well, not necessarily, because some of your bonds will get in, but other bonds will get kicked out.
Right, of course, yeah. So out of the total amount that you're trying to bond, some percentage will be on average in it all the time, and that percentage will basically fluctuate as demand for bonding spots increases and falls. Yeah, and then if there's a lot of demand, if there's too many people queuing up, we can raise the minimum.
Yeah.
And if there's not enough, we could lower the minimum. But the idea with the mechanism is to make sure that we always have enough, because we always have buffer room. We target the extra people who are waiting to be bonded, rather, so that we never end up in a situation where there's not enough people who are bonded.
Mm-hmm.
But currently in your POC, you just let people bond.
Pretty much,
you have and the tax increases as more and more people are bonded, so
so there's two numbers, right? One is the deposit minimum, and the deposit minimum is this formula where I think it's like 1250 over 250 minus V, where V is the existing number of validators. So basically the minimum validator size kind of ratchets up to infinity as the number of existing validators goes up.
Okay.
Then on top of that you have the tax. And the tax starts off being 61 parts per billion per block, and then after a period of exactly 10 million seconds, at least currently, it goes up to 161 parts per billion per block.
Okay, so it's not a function of the number of validators.
No, it's just a function of time. So basically, if you get in, you're only going to validate for 4 months, and then you have to kind of wait for 4 months, and then.
So the only thing that's going to stop you from getting more validators is the fact that the minimum is ratcheting up.
Yeah. And like once you're
But
at 249
is there a maximum number? Do you have a maximum number?
yeah, well, the maximum number of validators is 250, because once it gets
Okay.
to
You have a hard coded maximum.
then the minimum will be like basically like almost the amount of ether that there is.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. So I was just concerned that maybe you wouldn't have a good upper bound, but that seems fine. Okay, cool. But you generally you like that do you prefer the sampling approach or the kind of let everyone in and tax
I kind of
approach?
prefer my approach because it doesn't have dependencies on a random number on a kind of high stake random number generator working.
I totally agree with you, but you've already let go of the design goal of never using a random generator.
Yeah, but the
Haven't
thing
you?
about right
Because
now, what I have is a low stakes random number generator, because like if someone manipulates it and they get to produce a few more blocks, whatever. Whereas
right.
here, like if an attacker is trying to get in, then if they manipulate the RNG, then they can get all of their validators in quickly. Or someone who wants, or if someone can manipulate the RNG to try to validate more often and get more profits.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, and for yours, for just for the validator selection, even if you say get to choose your validator for every block, you still have to share transaction fees with everyone.
Yeah.
So you don't, the benefit isn't necessarily that high.
Well, Vlad, I'm confused.
You'll get all the
What-
transactions in your model.
I'm confused as to what the value of the sampling is. What's the advantage over the simply making it more and more expensive?
So there are a couple of advantages. One of them is that if you have a bond, many more people could be waiting to bond than are bonded. So we can always make sure we have the number of bonders that we target. We can just like pick a number and say like this is the amount that we'll have, and we can like make sure that we'll always have that essentially. Because we have a lot of room to target and to adjust to make sure that we always have it. Whereas with the Talix thing, there's like a variable number of validators. And the other thing is that if there's more people trying to bond than can be bonded for the reasonable amount of overhead, in Vitalik's model, only the lowest cost, highest bond validators will get in. Whereas with mine, you'll have a probability of getting in, even if you're not the lowest cost, highest bond validator.
Yeah.
So the sampling thing, I feel that it's somehow more democratic.
Yeah, I get what you mean. If I had access to like a magic random number generator, I'd probably consider taking it.
But what about Randau? I mean, Randau with the validator.
Well, it's
So pick a subset of validators and do Randau.
right. Yeah, Randau's fine. So one thing I don't want. Okay, I kind of would prefer to avoid protocol level Randau, unless absolutely necessary. The reason being that Randau allows you to steal money from people by censoring them.
Right. So that's going to be true for any good cryptoeconomic random number generator.
Right. So basically, I'm trying to avoid dependencies on good cryptoeconomic random number generators.
Right. So the main reasons why I would say it would be good to do is okay. So the other idea is maybe we can have, instead of having a sampling, maybe we could have deterministic churn.
Yeah.
So but even before thinking about that is
well, if you deterministic churn, that means exploitable churn.
Sorry.
How would you do deterministic? Yeah. Well,
Wait,
first
but I want to mention one more thing before we get into that discussion, which is that if we do have a protocol level randomness, then we can provide it into an opcodes that are currently used by dApps for randomness. For example, like the block hash opcode, people tend to use that for randomness. We could feed the protocol level randomness into that opcode. And it would have an option for it, and then all dApps would have access to this data feed, which I think would be kind of cool, on some level. But that's just like a low value aside. And so, do we want to talk about deterministic churn now?
Yeah, just quickly, I'm curious how like.
No, I mean, I've never really thought about it too much. But basically, the idea would be, you would have like a queue, and then you would be kicked out of the bonding set, and you'd have to go back to the back of the queue.
How would you get? Yeah. Okay. How would you get in the queue in the first place?
You place a bond transaction.
Just by place a bond, and the order of the queue would be determined by the current set of bonded validators, right?
Basically, because they're ordering the transactions.
Right. Exactly. Okay.
And then you'd have
Like
some time perhaps based on the size of your bond that you will be in the bonding set before you get kicked out.
So, but the current
so that can be completely manipulated, right?
Sorry, say that again.
That can be completely manipulated, right? So the incumbents can.
No, we could do commit reveal, so it will be okay.
commit reveal. How would commit reveal work here?
They wouldn't know that they're ordering a bond transaction until it's kind of too late, and then as long as they can't censor the reveal on the fact that was a bond transaction, they can't.
But like if there was someone they wanted to get in, like if they had planted another identity as a validator, then they would know to vote for to place that vote or that entry into the queue ahead of others, right?
Sure, but that would be on kind of like a short-term basis, right? You wouldn't be able. That wouldn't be used to manipulate the order on like a basis of like days.
On the basis of days.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to use that to like delay put you days.
Oh,
right. If someone plays a bond transaction days ahead of you, you're not gonna be able to.
Sure.
Ahead of them. But basically, so it can be gamed exactly in as much as the order of transactions can be gamed.
Okay, yeah, exactly. So I kind of feel like it seems like a good path to go because it simplifies things.
And it's deterministic, doesn't rely on this random number thing, and we still get arguably some of the democratic properties of having a larger bonding set than is possible to be currently bonded. So people technically having the idea of an attempted bonding set. Or basically, I guess here they're just like bonded validators that are currently not in like an active role.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So any feelings about that, Beam?
Yeah, I mean, don't have very strong feelings on that issue. I just kind of want whatever simplest.
Okay. The queue seems really simple to me.
Right. Maybe.
It seems simpler to me than your taxation approach. Making it more expensive the more validators there are.
Well, hold on. My taxation approach and making it more expensive the more validators there are two different things, right?
Oh, okay. Sorry. So there's the minimum growing up as the number of validators go up.
And then there's the tax which goes up after as a step function after some period of time.
Oh yeah, right. Okay, forcing you to
both each of those are like one line of code. So
okay.
So question: would you, if you're in the queue but you have not yet been selected as a validator, can you withdraw without a long withdrawal period?
Hold on. If you're oh, I see.
That's a good question. So that depends on
the client. I would imagine the answer probably should be yes, and the reason
because
is
if so, there's an incentive to sell spots in the bonding queue.
Right.
So then, you're Jeff. What you're suggesting is the answer should be
try making the spots in the bonding queue unsellable. So you could require accounts in the bonding queue to be secured by static validation code.
Well, I mean, if we're going to allow people to write their own custom signature algorithms, then there's no way to make them unsellable.
Algorithms aren't all to be stateful, right?
Yes, there is, because you forbid the signatures from being dependent on external data.
Yeah, the signatures are not stateful.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, but you just set up a proxy, right?
Yeah, you just sell the account.
You hand over.
Yeah, you can't set up a proxy.
Yeah, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Okay, but just naively speaking, what if I know who my potential clients are and I just include them all in something like a ring signature, and then when with a low enough threshold that I can be the deciding vote, and then I basically give my key to the person who buys the spot in my bonding queue off of me.
Right.
Right.
You could
So-
do
so-
that.
so-
You have no double send them because you still have the key.
Yeah. But do you think that not letting people unbond quickly would stop this problem, Jeff?
Well, certainly it would make it a very illiquid market for slots.
Yeah, because you wouldn't be able to say place down a lot of slots and then withdraw them at the last second if you don't have a buyer.
Exactly.
So I think that's a good case for having the bonders the bonders have really commit to being in the queue. And
On the other hand, there are economic arguments for making the bonders and not have to commit. Basically,
you'll have more bonding on
well,
average.
you don't lose liquidity unless you actually get selected, and unless you get, and at which point you're kind of guaranteed profit, almost guaranteed profit if you stake reasonably well.
Right.
So it makes the process safer.
The other important consideration is whether or not the client knows the people who are currently bonded or the people who are currently bonded and in the queue. Because if they know, if they're relying on signatures from people who are bonded and in the queue, then and there could be an opportunity intervals for an adversary where they're not a lot of their notes are in the queue. But if the clients need to know exactly who's currently bonded, then they have to kind of resync more often because the queue would kind of give them more time.
Mm-hmm.
I apologize. I came in late here. Is there a Reader's Digest version of how the queuing mechanism works?
Vlad.
No, this is the first time I've ever thought of it, discussed it. This is literally all super new stuff. The reason this came up was because we're talking about sampling, and then we were like, and then Vitalik said he didn't want to use it because of the entropy thing, and then I thought maybe we could do a validator churn without entropy, and the queue was the first example of that I was able to think of.
Right. I'll think about it.
So I had to transfer devices, and I didn't quite catch all of the conversation about schedules versus blocks that you were giving, Vlad. And we kind of moved on, so I didn't want to say anything. But maybe at some point we can go back and revisit that discussion because I wasn't very convinced by it.
There was one other thing that I wanted to bring up, which is, okay, so bet incentivization. So right now, bets are transactions, and so the way I have it in the POC is that people who send bets have to kind of create and come up with mechanisms by which they prove to miners that if they submit the bet, then some other mechanism pays the validator to include the bet in a block. So there's two design decisions there. One design decision is that the mechanism for paying the validators to include the bets is currently completely up to each individual validator. It's not part of the Casper contract. The main pro is generality. The main con is basically decreases efficiency. And I do think efficiency is really important for bets because they're the highest kind of volume, highest overhead thing in the entire mechanism right now. The second part is, do we leave the fees for including bets to be kind of completely up to the market, or do we introduce some kind of in protocol set fee?
Good questions. So, is there a way to incentivize it without paying fees? Is my first question. Without having them just pay fees in the ordinary way.
So what you could do is you could just introduce an in-protocol reward to.
So right now, my version of Casper has this property that if you skip blocks, then people are punished. So validator non-participating.
Talking about including bets and blocks, right?
I know, and so I'm wondering if a similar type of logic might be applied for bets, where if bet.
But the problem is that you can't. If someone fails to include a bet, then you can't tell whether it's because they just chose not to include the bet or because the bet didn't exist at the time.
Right, but you can tell if there are less bets overall included in the block. Like over long term, there's less bets.
In the long term, yes, but I'd prefer a more sort of transactional and model of incentivization because it's cleaner to analyze.
So technically, if you wanted to, you could have a relativistic conception of time overlaid where if the bet or anyone who knew about the bet is included, then you can clock the timeliness of the bet.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, can you say that again, Jeff? I didn't follow.
Well, if you're trying to separate the idea between was the bet created and not included, or basically it's back to the data availability issue, right? So if you're trying to differentiate between was the bet submitted late or was it created earlier and censored, you can get at least a relativistic version of the actual time of availability by just making it so that basically you impose universal hash time on top of things and some kind of like proof of custody so that you have.
Would that create a delay in when the bet gets included?
It doesn't create a delay. It's in this auxiliary system that's only used in the event of appeals and disagreements. So you should be able to basically game theory it out of the chain.
Right. But how would you describe that as an incentive to include bets?
Well, if you don't include bets, probabilistic evidence can be brought over time that you're doing it.
Okay. But
it's like the reconciliation
still kind of over the long term, everyone would get punished, as opposed to rewarding individuals for including bets as soon as possible.
Right. I'm just saying that'd be a mechanism to measure timeliness.
Yeah, I think that's right, but it's not exactly what Vitalik was asking for. But I agree. I think that's more in line with what I was suggesting. Greg, sorry, you were saying something?
No, I was agreeing with your classification. Essentially, what you're looking for is as I understood Jeff's proposal, it's a kind of post facto reconciliation process, which fits in with the classification that you just proposed. Have I got that right, Jeff? That with the timeliness mechanism that you propose, you can do a post facto reconciliation process.
Basically, I mean, what you would ideally do is you would just have that trail of evidence be a method of creating mutual knowledge, and then people would just immediately accept the punishments rather than actually adjudicate them.
Yeah, fair enough.
Cool. So I like the idea of bets including transaction fees, and then the incentive for including bets is the same as including transaction fees, but it does seem like it requires a transaction fee policy, because otherwise, you could imagine, a cartel of validators just accepting each other's bets for zero transaction fees, and require.
But if a cartel accepts each other's bets for zero transaction fees, how does that cartel collectively benefit? Because if they're accepting each other's
because they could charge the other ones. They could charge people who aren't in their cartel extortionate amounts for inclusion of their bets.
Oh, so basically, isn't that just equivalent to a cartel that's like excluding bets from particular validators?
It's traditional price fixing.
No, not just
excluding. Have anything to do with fees.
Yes, but it's more like we're not excluding them. We're just requiring a high fee from them.
Aren't they just losing out on transaction fees by doing that? Because assuming that there are other validators who are acting fairly, then they will just get those transaction fees?
No, I think the point is that basically it's kind of an extortion attack. It's basically saying you give us lots of money and we'll profit from that, or else we'll seriously harm you by not including your bets.
Right, but
the interesting there's a nice trick here.
The bet will be included later by one of the other validators who will benefit from those high fees if they're not included by the other.
Well, hold on, but then
the bet will be included as quickly.
Yeah,
but actually you're onto something though, which is a nice trick, which is that you make some essential piece of progress be of information necessary to make progress, the only includable in bet proposals, right? So
Sure.
you split up the information for the protocol so that you have to publish bets, because bets contain essentially something that's like a key to unlock making the next step in the protocol. So it's a generic technique, right? So everyone is incentivized to publish bets because that's the only way the protocol can progress.
About the Everblock, but I could see, I could see there being, that being the case.
I got every syllable of
that. For everyone, right?
I got every fourth syllable of that. Can you?
Way that the protocol can progress in a way that's profitable for everyone, I think that would be acceptable. But if it's the only way for the protocol to progress, then that sounds like a source of blocking.
Yeah. No, I mean, obviously, you can turn it. You can modulate the technique so that it's profitable. But the point is, you split up the information necessary for the protocol to progress, so that some essential pieces of it are in bet publications. And then everyone is completely incentivized to put bets in blocks.
Protocol from progressing, then I potentially use that as a loop.
I guess I must.
Can you say that again? I couldn't hear you at all.
But if I can stop the protocol from progressing, then I can.
Yeah, it seems like the ability to stop the protocol from progressing is potentially worse.
What I would do is stop it from progressing in a way that is. We would never want to stop it from progressing at all.
No, I mean everyone has the control to stop it from progressing, right? And
of course they are.
Sure they do, because they can just simply not publish blocks at all. Period. Right. So
yeah, sure. And the other validators will publish blocks, and the protocol will progress without them.
Right. So again, only this is about splitting up the information. Sorry.
You break.
Oh, sorry. I got interrupted.
I feel like I'm missing something here with the idea of like a cartel of validators extorting fees out of bets, since other validators are going to include those bets. Other honest validators are going to include those bets at a later block. So like,
I think the term that we need to understand the situation is it's just traditional price fixing, guys. It's just traditional price fixing.
Sure, but the idea is that like there are some people who are willing to supply at a lower price, but the main problem is that those people who are willing to supply at a lower price will only be able to include your bet at a later block, and so the fact that your bet is being included later is actually something that is bad for you, right? So and therefore you'll be able to be charged as much as as much as you would pay to get your bet in earlier. So the fact that your bet is only getting in later is actually a huge deal. Which is why a transaction fee policy might stop this kind of price fixing from occurring, because there would be basically like a mandatory price for the bet, and there would be like no discretion. So you wouldn't be able to you would still be able to make a cartel that includes people's bets later, but you wouldn't be able to charge them more to be included earlier.
So I think it's actually a little bit naive to think that we can restrict fees for inclusion to on-chain. It's trivial to write an off-chain fee.
Accidental payments. I don't think we can, like, price fixing is not going to work.
So no, you're right, but at least what we can do is in this case we can take the fees from the people what we can do is have a mandatory minimum fee, and we can redistribute that fee to everyone, so that the fees that the cartel is paying also goes to the people who aren't in the cartel, and so there is going to be some cost. I mean, so you're not going to be able to just like totally keep the funds within the cartel, because some of those fees will go to the people who aren't in the cartel.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. I'm feeling not too satisfied. But making it be simply normal transaction fees, it does seem somewhat sensible. The main thing that I really worry about actually is the thing that I think we should really worry about is, validators having a slight incentive to only include bets that they agree with. Right. So, in my block, I will include bets from validators who bet in the same way that I did.
Mm-hmm.
And that sounds like there basically would be a potential price that someone could pay me to include their bets when they disagree with me. But unless they're paying that amount, then I'm not going to be able to. Then I'm not going to include them.
I mean, the hope is that each individual bet should have a pretty small influence on the outcome of a block, so that shouldn't happen too much.
Yeah.
Like the hope is the hope with I think with the whole algorithm is that in the normal case, it's kind of obvious as ways that or one kind of correct choice that everyone should be betting towards. So there's not going to be much opportunity to gain any kind of weird influence or profit from getting any kind of weird influence.
Yeah. I kind of agree with you, and in any case, like, yeah.
Okay.
So the other, unfortunately, I keep
question that I was trying to figure out was
loss and drop.
Yeah, you're breaking up on our side as well, Greg.
Okay. Well, maybe I can't refresh because if I refresh, then the whole thing it goes away.
Really?
You're both breaking up for me, so I'm not sure it's a Greg specific problem.
You're both being me and Greg?
Okay.
Yeah.
Or Vitalik and Greg?
All three of you.
Oh, wow. So but you never break up for me, Jeff.
Yeah, Jeff has been very clear.
That's because I'm special.
Of course. But I do think that the general technique of splitting the protocol so that you have key information in the bets actually works, right? Because it's the same issue, right? Those who are attempting to halt the protocol will be stymied by those who want the transaction fees, and so will simply progress the protocol. No matter, I mean, it's exactly the same economic situation as was described earlier.
As long as anyone can go and progress the protocol, that works.
Yeah.
I didn't
so
catch
the
the
other
response.
question that
Sorry, what was that?
So here's the thing that I've learned from Google Hangouts. You get really bad lag after about an hour. So if we want to continue the session, what we can do is I can just make a new session, and then we can jump over to that. But we're getting really awful lag and breakup. So do people want to continue for another an hour and 22 minutes into this? Do we want to just continue the discussion, in which case I'll just make a new link, or we can pick it up at the next stand-up time.
Right. So you were saying that Google Hangouts tend to get worse after an hour, right?
Yeah.
Say again.
You were saying that Google Hangouts tend to get worse after an hour.
Yeah. I've discovered this over several years of using these. That you get lag and breakup.
You had
so if you want,
so I hadn't been able to tell if that's what you said.
Breaking up is hard to do. So
okay,
do people want to continue the discussion?
I do.
Yeah, me too. This is
For a
good.
bit.
So
I need to go in
how about
about
you
6
make a
minutes.
new hangout and then post the hangout link in the chat of this hangout?
No, that doesn't work. Google won't let you do that. But I'll post the new link in Skype in just a few minutes.
Okay.
Or a few seconds. All right. Ciao.
If we have any live listeners, we might want to, I guess, like, either say goodbye or give them another link.
Right. I can post the new link in the comments of the old Hangout.
Okay. Cool.
All right. Cool.
Yay, it's a linked list.